I used to think pain had a limit, that once you'd been broken enough, abandoned enough, mocked enough, the heart would go numb. That after a certain point, rejection couldn't cut any deeper. I was wrong. I remember the night my mate rejected me as if it were carved into my skin. The ceremonial fire burned bright, casting long shadows over the pack's circle. I stood there trembling in the white dress they had forced me into, waiting for the words I'd been told would bind me forever. But when he looked at me, my fated mate, the one the moon had chosen for me, his lips curled into disgust. "I will not claim her," he spat before the entire pack. "I reject this bond. I reject this bond." The words shattered me like glass beneath a hammer. The crowd gasped, some sneered, others laughed. My wolf whimpered in my chest, a sound of such devastation that I thought I might collapse. Rejection burned worse than any flame. It wasn't just a denial, it was a ripping, a tearing of soul from soul. He left me there, trembling, humiliated. I can still feel the cold of that night, how the ground seemed to open beneath me while the pack closed ranks against me. Their eyes gleamed with cruel delight. A rejected Omega was nothing. Less than nothing. They shoved me out of the circle, spat in the dirt at my feet, and told me to run, run and never return. I did. For weeks, I stumbled through forests and barren hills, living off roots and rainwater, nursing wounds both visible and hidden. Every step away from my pack was a step deeper into loneliness. My wolf never spoke again. Her silence was louder than the howls that haunted me at night. Even now, years later, the scar of that rejection burns. They branded me weak, disposable, an outcast. I wore their cruelty like a second skin, because what else was I to do? I survived. But survival has a price. Hunger carves you hollow. Cold makes you brittle. Loneliness becomes a constant companion, whispering that you should have died that night instead of running. Still, I endured. I told myself if the moon had cursed me, I would curse it back by living anyway. It was during those wandering years that I first heard whispers of him, the Alpha King, Kaelen Stormfang, a name carried on every tongue, spoken with fear and awe. They said his rage consumed entire villages, that his fury was so great, his enemies turned to ash before his claws, that even his counselors trembled at his voice. Mothers frightened their pups into obedience with warnings of his wrath. And yet, they followed him. All packs bent the knee, even the proud ones who had once sworn never to bow. For Kaelen Stormfang was not just an alpha. He was the alpha of alphas, the ruler of the realm, his bloodline forged in conquest and shadow. It should have meant nothing to me. I was already broken, already forgotten. What did one more tyrant matter? But I couldn't ignore the way people spoke of him. Not just in fear, in awe, in respect. "He is unstoppable," they whispered in taverns. "No wolf dares challenge him." "He's cursed," others murmured. Since his mate betrayed him, his rage has never ended. Perhaps that was why his story clung to me. Because in him, I saw a reflection of my own ruin, another soul who had lost everything, another bond broken, though his was by betrayal, mine by rejection, both of us left hollow by those who should have loved us. And yet, unlike me, he had not been silenced. He had not been cast out. His pain had become fire, and that fire had consumed kingdoms. I wondered often in the dead of night if that was the difference between us. He had been born a king, I had been born an Omega. He could turn grief into fury, while I could only turn mine into scars. But scars tell stories, don't they? And mine whispered to me that one day, no matter how far I ran, no matter how long I hid, Fate would drag me back into the fire. I didn't know then that the fire would be him, the Alpha King, Kaelen Stormfang, and that the moment my rejected, broken self stood before his rage, neither of us would ever be the same again. For now, I wander, I hide, I scavenge what I can, and cling to the fragments of strength left in me. But in the distance, I can feel something stirring. A storm, a fury, a destiny I did not ask for. And in the heart of that storm burns amber eyes that have never seen me yet. Because one day, I will stand before him, the rejected Omega no one wanted, and when his gaze meets mine, the fire that devoured kingdoms will falter, power hind, and he will not be able to resist power. They say, every kingdom has a heart. For ours, that heart is not the palace, not the council chambers, not even the sacred grove of the moon. It is him, the Alpha King, Kaelen Stormfang, and that heart beats in rage. I had never seen him with my own eyes, but his presence carried across the realm like thunder rolling in from distant mountains. Travelers spoke of him with voices lowered, as though to say his name too loudly would draw his gaze. And if his gaze found you, you might not live to tell of it. I listened in the shadows of taverns and markets, invisible as ever, soaking in the stories like bitter wine. His temper's worse than wildfire, one soldier told his drinking companions. Saw him rip through an entire warband for insulting his crest, left nothing but blood on the snow. Another leaned close, whispering, like sharing a forbidden secret. It's the mate bond that ruined him. She betrayed him, ran into the arms of his rival, and left him hollow. Since then, his wolf's been unchained. Each tale painted him more monstrous, more unstoppable. Some said his fury could topple castles, others that he'd killed his own counselor for daring to question him. I didn't know how much was truth, how much was fear twisted into myth. But one thing was certain, Kaelen was not just a king, he was a weapon the world trembled to hold. I should have hated him on principle. Another alpha wielding power with claws instead of wisdom. Another male raised on the arrogance of dominance, fed on blood and fear. But part of me couldn't stop listening. Couldn't stop wondering what it was like to be that strong, that untouchable. Because I was the opposite. Weak, broken, disposable. And yet, perhaps that's why I kept following the whispers. I learned he'd taken the throne at 24, barely a man by mortal reckoning. His father had been murdered in some border betrayal, and Kaelen had stepped into the crown with fire in his blood. They said he led battles himself, never hiding behind walls or generals. His scars proved it. I'd heard too many descriptions of them to dismiss it as rumor. What haunted me most was the story of his mate, the one who had broken him. She was perfect, a woman whispered near the market fires. A warrior's daughter, fierce and beautiful. Everyone thought they'd be unstoppable. Power story. But when she stood before the altar, she turned away from him, rejected him, chose another. Rejected him. The words cut deeper than I expected. They mirrored mine, though twisted. He had been rejected. I had been rejected. His wound had bled into fury, mine into silence. But underneath, both of us had been marked by the same curse, to be unwanted by the one fate had chosen. No wonder he raged. I sat awake many nights wondering if that rage ever quieted. Did he scream into the night as I had? Did his wolf weep in silence like mine? Or had he mastered what I could not, turning rejection into fuel, into a storm that bent the world to his will? The stories painted him in blood, yes, but also in loneliness. A king on a throne surrounded by wolves yet utterly alone. It struck me then. Perhaps his rage was not the source of his power, but the mask hiding his grief. I should not have cared. He was a king. I was an exile. His story had nothing to do with mine. And yet, each time I heard his name, my chest tightened as though invisible threads tugged at my ribs. Kaelen Stormfang, the Alpha King. A monster to some, a savior to others, a wolf forged of fury. And me? I was nothing. But fate has a cruel way of weaving nobodies into the path of kings. I didn't realize it then, but every step I took away from my ruined past was a step closer to him. The whispers grew louder in the places I wandered. The rumors sharpened into truth. His soldiers passed more often on the roads. His name carried on every tongue. The storm was circling, and the day would come when I could no longer run from it. I had been rejected once and left hollow. He had been rejected and left raging, and fate, merciless, unyielding, was already preparing to throw us into the same fire. I lay awake in the ruins of an old watchtower that night, staring at the cracked stones above me. My wolf was silent, as always, but in my heart I felt something stir, a strange, dangerous certainty. I would see him, not because I wanted to, not because I sought his rage, but because the bond I thought destroyed wasn't finished with me yet. And when I stood before him, when my brokenness met his fury, something in both of us would shatter again. Only this time, neither of us would walk away unchanged. There are nights when the past doesn't let me sleep. Nights when even the silence of the forest feels too loud, pressing memories against my skin until they suffocate me. I close my eyes, and I am back there again. The night my life unraveled, the night my chains were forged. The claiming ceremony was supposed to be sacred, a celebration of the moon's will, a binding of two souls who would stand side by side until death. I remember the way the pack gathered beneath the full moon, cloaks shimmering white, the ceremonial fire crackling in the center of the clearing. My hands trembled as I held them together, palms damp with sweat, emanated. My wolf paced inside me, nervous but hopeful. She whispered, "This is our destiny. This is what we were made for." I believed her. When they called my name, I stepped forward, my heart pounding. I remember every detail, the crunch of gravel under my bare feet, the smell of pine and smoke, the weight of every eye fixed on me, and then him, my fated mate. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of wolf every girl in the pack dreamed of. His gaze cut into me as if he could peel away my layers and see the truth of who I was. I thought foolishly that I saw longing in his eyes, percent. But longing can be cruel. When the alpha demanded the words of acceptance, he looked straight at me and spat them like venom. I reject her. I reject this bond. The fire seemed to roar in my ears. My knees nearly buckled. I waited for him to laugh, to say it was some twisted joke, but no. He turned his back. He cast me aside before the moon, before my family, before the entire pack. The gasps turned into whispers. The whispers turned into laughter. Some even cheered, as if my humiliation was sport. I couldn't breathe. My wolf howled inside me, a sound of pain so sharp I thought I might die right there. But then, silence. Her voice, her presence, her warmth, gone. She vanished from me as though she too had rejected me. And in that emptiness, I stood alone. The alpha of my pack declared me an outcast. A rejected omega has no place among wolves. His words echoed in the clearing, final and merciless. They shoved me out, spat at my feet, tore the ceremonial dress from my body. I remember stumbling through the trees, branches clawing at my skin, tears blinding me. I didn't know where I was running, only that I had to get away from the laughter, from the eyes that had watched me break. I told myself I would never look back. But chains don't let you walk freely. Even now, years later, the memory drags behind me like iron. Every sneer I endured, every whispered worthless omega, they carved grooves into me so deep I sometimes wonder if I'll ever crawl out. And worst of all, my wolf's silence remains. At first, I tried to reach her. I begged, screamed, cried until my voice broke. I curled in caves, clutching my chest, whispering to her, "Please come back. Please don't leave me. We're nothing without each other." And she never answered. Not once. She is still there. I can feel the faint shadow of her presence like a heartbeat muffled behind walls of stone. But she will not speak. She will not fight. She has turned her face from me, and that silence is its own rejection. It's why some nights I believe I am cursed. Perhaps I was never meant for a bond at all. Perhaps. Fate tied me to the wrong wolf, and when he cut me loose, it cut away everything that made me whole. Others have moved on, I'm sure. My former mate probably took another, basked in the glory of a new Luna. My pack likely forgot my name, except when they want to sneer about the cursed girl who was too weak to keep her bond. But me? I carry it still. The rejection is carved into my very bones. I've built a life on scraps, roots, berries, water from streams, but no matter how far I wander, the memory of that night stalks me like a predator. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to let them kill me. At least then, the silence in my chest would have ended, but I live. That is the cruelest truth of all. I live, and I carry this emptiness, this silence, this chain that drags me toward a destiny I never asked for. And sometimes, when I hear whispers of the Alpha King's fury, I wonder, does he carry chains too? I, he carry chains too. I, 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 I. Does his rage come from the same place my silence does, an unhealed wound, a rejection that left him broken? If so, then perhaps fate is more twisted than I imagined. For if two broken wolves are bound together, what do they become? A cure for each other, or a curse that consumes everything. I had learned how to stay invisible, to pass from one patch of forest to another like a shadow, to steal food from camps without a sound, to listen to footsteps and breaths and know when danger was near. But fate doesn't care for invisibility. The borderlands had been tense for weeks. Two rival packs clashed over hunting rights, their skirmishes staining the earth with blood. I should have stayed away, but hunger drove me too close. I crept near one of their abandoned encampments, searching for scraps of bread or bone. I never heard the soldier behind me until it was too late. Rough hands seized my arms. A blow to the side of my head sent me sprawling. By the time I scrambled up, half a dozen wolves had circled me, eyes gleaming with contempt. "A stray omega," one sneered. "What luck, the king will be pleased." The king. My blood froze. They bound my wrists and dragged me through the mud, ignoring my thrashing. I bit, I kicked, I screamed, but I was nothing against their strength. Hours later, bruised and bloodied, I was shoved into a war camp larger than anything I'd ever seen. And there he was, the Alpha King, Kaelen Stormfang. He stood at the center of the camp like a storm-given flesh. Tall, broad-shouldered, every inch of him radiated command. His presence was so heavy the air seemed to bend under it. His warriors bowed their heads when his gaze passed. Yet I noticed even they shifted uneasily, as if proximity to him was like standing too close to a fire. His eyes, gods, his eyes. Amber glowing faintly even in daylight, filled with a fury that seemed bottomless. The soldiers shoved me forward. "A gift, Your Majesty." a feral omega caught near the border. He turned to me slowly, as though measuring whether I was worth the effort of his attention. When his gaze locked on me, I felt my knees weaken. My body screamed to bow, but my pride forced me upright. "What is this?" His voice was deep, rough, carrying a growl beneath every syllable. "You bring me scraps?" "She was trespassing, my king," the soldier stammered. "We thought—" "You thought wrong." His tone cracked like a whip. "Do you insult me with this? An omega?" The soldier shrank back, but Kaelen's eyes had already settled on me. They were full of rage, sharp enough to strip skin from bone. "Execute her," he ordered coldly. The words rang through me like a death bell. Two soldiers moved to obey, gripping my arms and forcing me to my knees. My heart pounded, my breath caught, and for a moment, I thought this was the end. After everything, after years of exile and silence and survival, my story would end here in the dirt, unremarkable and forgotten. But then it happened. His gaze met mine again, and something shifted, a crack in the fury. His nostrils flared, his body stiffened. Power wears. His wolf, I could feel it. Even from across the space, stirred violently inside him, snarling not at me, but at those holding me down. Kaelen's amber eyes widened, confusion flashing through his mask of rage. "Stop!" His voice was sharper than steel. The soldiers froze instantly. The world held its breath. I stared up at him, trembling, but unable to look away. Something invisible pulled at me. A thread, a force, a tether I had not felt since the night I was rejected. It hummed beneath my skin, ancient and undeniable. The bond. It flared to life like a spark catching dry kindling. Not the broken, twisted one I had endured before. This was different, fierce, alive. My wolf, silent for so long, stirred faintly, as if turning her head toward him. I gasped. Kaelen did too. His hand twitched at his side as though he wanted to reach for me but didn't dare. His wolf howled within him, audible only to him, demanding he protect what he had just moments ago ordered destroyed. "What trick is this?" His voice was rougher now, strained. "What are you?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. I could only shake my head, fighting the tears that burned behind my eyes. His rage battled something else in him. Recognition, need, confusion. He looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him, as though all the certainty he'd wielded like a blade had shattered. "Release her," he ordered. The soldiers hesitated. "But, sire," I said, "release her." The force of his command made even the tents tremble. Hands dropped from my arms. I stumbled forward, weak and unsteady, but still locked in his gaze. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't know why fate had chosen him, of all wolves, the Alpha King, the monster of rage, the storm that terrified nations. But I knew this. The bond had chosen, whether we willed it or not. And, from the way his eyes blazed, from the way his wolf roared behind them, Kaelen Stormfang, the Alpha King, could not resist me. Not now, not ever. The first thing I noticed about the palace was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, watchful kind. Like the entire place was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen to me. The guards who dragged me through its marble halls wouldn't meet my eyes. They looked nervous, as if I were not a prisoner but a curse they'd been ordered to deliver. At every turn, warriors stood stiff as stone, their gazes flickering toward me, and then away, like they feared being caught staring. I understood why. I had felt it too, that moment when Kaelen Stormfang's eyes met mine, when the bond flared between us. It had been impossible, undeniable. His wolf had recognized me. And yet, Here I was, shackled and shoved into a stone chamber deep within his palace. A cage. The door slammed shut, iron bolts clanging. For a long time I sat in the cold silence, knees pulled to my chest, wondering if this was mercy or cruelty. He hadn't killed me, but he hadn't set me free either. When he came, hours later, the air shifted before he even entered. His presence pressed against me like a storm rolling in, full of thunder and violence. The door swung open, and there he was, the Alpha King, framed in shadow and firelight, his amber eyes burning like twin suns. I rose unsteadily, forcing myself to stand, despite the tremble in my knees. "Why are you here?" His voice was rough, accusing. He stalked closer, each step deliberate, controlled, but I could sense the wildness barely leashed beneath. "Why does my wolf?" He broke off, jaw tightening. "What trick are you playing?" "No trick," I whispered. His eyes narrowed. "Then explain why the bond screams every time I look at you. Explain why the part of me that wants to tear you apart is the same part that demands I protect you." I swallowed hard. "I can't." "You will." His voice cracked like a whip. The force of his alpha power hit me like a wave, demanding submission. My body trembled with the instinct to bow, to bare my throat, to yield, but I clenched my fists and forced myself upright. "No," I said softly. The words seemed to strike him harder than any weapon. His wolf snarled in his chest, but not at me, at him. Kaelen's lips pulled back from his teeth, fury and confusion battling in his expression. "You defy me?" he growled. I met his gaze. "I've been broken before. I won't bow again, not to you, not to anyone." For a heartbeat, silence. Then, to my shock, a low, almost feral laugh broke from him. It was humorless, edged with something darker. "You're bold for a rejected Omega," he said, circling me like a predator testing prey. "Most would be groveling by now, begging for mercy." "I don't beg," I whispered. My voice shook, but I made sure the words did not. Something flickered in his eyes, not just anger this time, but recognition. His wolf surged forward, restless. I could feel it in the bond, the beast inside him straining, not to harm me but to shield me, to claim me. Kaelen hissed under his breath, as if arguing with himself. His hands flexed at his sides, claws half-formed. "This shouldn't be happening," he muttered. "You're nothing. An Omega. Broken. Yet your wolf won't let you kill me," I said quietly. His head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. He looked at me like I'd torn open a wound he'd tried to keep hidden. For a long time, neither of us spoke. His chest rose and fell with the force of his breathing, his rage pulsing against me like heat. And then, slowly, he stepped closer. So close I could see the scar bisecting his collarbone, the faint tremor in his jaw. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. "You don't know what you are," he said, "but I will find out." His wolf howled behind the words, not in anger, but in fierce determination. Press. I felt it ripple through the bond. The strange, contradictory truth. His beast wanted to tear the world apart for me, even as Kaelen himself fought to deny it. I lifted my chin, my heart pounding. "Then look as long as you want. You'll find I'm not as weak as you think." For the first time since I'd seen him, Kaelen didn't look like the untouchable Alpha King. He looked unsettled, as if my defiance shook him more than submission ever could. His gaze raked over me one last time before he turned sharply, his cloak whipping behind him as he strode out. The door slammed, the bolts scraped back into place. But the silence that followed was no longer empty. It thrummed with the bond, alive and relentless. I sank back to the floor, trembling, not from fear but from the strange certainty growing inside me. Kaelen Stormfang, the Alpha King of Rage, was at war with himself, and I was the battlefield. The cell door creaked open again, but this time it wasn't the Alpha King who entered. It was a woman. She was older, perhaps 40, her hair streaked with silver, her healer's cloak embroidered with the crest of the royal pack. Her hands, though lined with years, carried a steady strength. She moved with quiet authority, and even the guards bowed their heads before she waved them away. I pulled back instinctively, pressing into the shadows. After Kaelin's last visit, I'd expected more rage, more questions, perhaps even an executioner's blade. Instead, this woman carried a satchel and the faint scent of herbs. "I'm not here to harm you," she said softly. "My name is Marin. I serve as the palace healer." I stared at her warily. "Then why are you here?" "Because the king ordered it," she admitted, though her voice lowered as if even the walls might listen. "He says it's only to confirm you aren't diseased, but," she studied me, her eyes sharp and assessing, "I think it's more than that." I bit my lip. More than that. Yes, because his wolf wouldn't let him leave me alone. Because the bond still hummed between us, insistent and undeniable. Marin set her satchel down and pulled out a small silver bowl. "May I?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. What choice did I have? She worked with surprising gentleness, washing the grime from my arms and shoulders, checking old scars, inspecting my eyes, as if searching for something more than sickness. Her hands paused on my wrist, where an old scar ran like a silver thread under the skin. Her eyes widened. "Gods above," she whispered. My stomach twisted. "What?" She pressed her fingers against the scar, muttering words I didn't recognize. The faintest shimmer of light glowed under her touch. She looked at me with something like awe. "You bear the moon mark." "I don't know what that means," I admitted, panic creeping into my voice. Marin drew back, visibly shaken. "It means you are not just any Omega. The moon mark is ancient, rare. It appears once in a generation, maybe less. It belongs to those chosen to balance the most powerful of alphas. It was said to be a gift from the moon goddess herself, to prevent kings from burning their kingdoms to ash." Her words struck like lightning. Balance, rage, a mark that tethered fury. My heart pounded. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I'm nothing. I was rejected." "Exactly," she cut in. "Your rejection might have suppressed your wolf, silenced her. But this mark, it never fades. No matter how many times you are cast aside." Before I could protest, the door slammed open again. The air thickened, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Kaelen. He strode into the chamber, eyes burning. His wolf's presence filled the space like fire licking at every stone. "What are you doing?" he demanded of Marin. The healer didn't flinch. She stood straighter, chin high. "What you asked of me, my king." I examined her, and I found the truth. Kaelin's gaze snapped to me, then to where Marin still pressed my wrist. "Speak plainly." "She carries the moon mark," Marin said firmly. "She is the one destined to balance you. That is why your wolf refuses to harm her. That is why he fights you when you try." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kaelin's jaw clenched, his amber eyes locked on mine, a storm raging in them. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something break, recognition, even hope. But it was crushed beneath fury. "No," he growled. "I won't accept this." Marin frowned. "My king, I said no. His voice cracked like thunder, rattling the iron chains on the wall. His claws half formed, his wolf surging to the surface in violent denial. I will not be bound again. I will not let fate chain me to another only to be betrayed. Not again. His words cut deeper than any blade. He looked at me as though I were both salvation and curse, the key to peace and the knife to his throat. You think I don't feel it? He hissed. Every time I see her, my wolf howls. He wants her, demands her. But I know what happens when you give your soul to another. They destroy you. They take everything. His voice broke, roughened with memory. I won't do it again. I swallowed against the ache in my chest. I didn't choose this either, I said quietly. You think I want this bond? You think I want to be dragged here, thrown in a cage, told I'm supposed to fix the king's rage like some healer's salve? My voice rose despite my trembling. I've been rejected once. I carry that scar every day. I won't be your curse, Kaelen Stormfang. I won't. His gaze locked with mine, amber fire clashing with my defiance. For a moment, it felt as though the bond itself quivered between us, pulled taut to breaking. His wolf surged forward again, not with anger this time, but with a desperate, restless need. Marin spoke softly, almost reverently. You can deny it, my king, but the bond cannot. The moon marked her for you, and you for her. Kaelen turned away sharply, breathing hard, as though refusing to look at me would keep the bond from strangling him. No, he said again, quieter but more dangerous. I will never accept it. I will not lose control again. And then he was gone, his cloak swirling behind him, leaving the air burning with fury and something far more dangerous. I sank back onto the cold stone, my wrist still tingling where Marin had touched the scar. The moon mark. Balance for a king's rage. And the Alpha King, who would rather burn himself alive than accept me. I woke to the sound of steel clashing against stone. At first, I thought it was a dream, the kind I sometimes had of battles long past. But then the shouts reached me guttural, urgent, the unmistakable roar of wolves in their shifted forms. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid sting of dark magic. The palace was under attack. The guards outside my door barked orders, their footsteps pounding down the corridor. Chains still circled my wrists loosely, more symbolic than binding, but my pulse hammered as the sounds grew closer. Shadow mages, I'd heard of them, but I had hoped the stories were exaggerated. They weren't. The door burst inward. One of Kaelin's warriors stumbled through, his throat slashed open. He fell at my feet, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Behind him slithered shadows too dark, too alive. And then Kaelen himself was there. He moved like fury embodied, his claws ripping through the first of the attackers. His eyes glowed, amber burning with lethal fire, his wolf surging just beneath his skin. He fought with the desperation of someone who refused to lose, not just as a king but as a man defending something he couldn't name. But there were too many. For every shadow mage he cut down, another emerged. One raised his staff, dark power gathering like a storm, aimed directly at him. No! The scream tore out of me before I could think. I lurched forward, chains dragging, my body reacting on instinct. And then, something inside me broke. Or no, not broke, awakened. For the first time in years, I felt her. My wolf. The voice that had been silent since the night I was rejected. She surged up from the hollow of my soul, fierce and blazing, shaking off years of silence and shame. Finally, she growled inside me, her voice low and wild. You called. I will not let him fall. Power ripped through me, silver and sharp, shattering the chains as if they were paper. My body moved before my mind caught up. One moment, I was human. The next, I was fur and fang, silver white against the darkness. My senses sharpened the scent of blood, the rhythm of hearts, the taste of fear. I lunged. My teeth sank into the wrist of the shadow mage just as his spell loosed. The magic sputtered, the light collapsing in his palm as he screamed. Kaelen turned at the sound, his eyes widening as he saw me. His wolf surged forward in recognition, amber clashing against my silver, a resonance that filled the chamber like thunder. "By the gods," he whispered, before another mage lunged at him. Together, we fought. Pyres. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. My wolf moved with his instinct, syncing, strikes meeting, defenses complementing each other. Where his rage burned hot and wild, mine cut sharp and precise, a balance of fury and control. We were two halves of a whole, fighting as if we had trained together all our lives. When the last mage fell, silence crashed over the chamber. The floor was littered with bodies, the air thick with smoke and iron. My chest heaved as I shifted back, collapsing to my knees. My wolf receded, but she didn't vanish this time. She lingered inside me, proud, fierce. "I am here now," she murmured. "I will never be silent again." My hands trembled as I touched my face, half expecting her to fade away like before. But she was still there. I could feel her. Kaelen stood across from me, blood streaking his bare chest, his breath ragged. He stared as though he were seeing me for the first time. "You shifted," he said, voice low with disbelief. I swallowed hard. "She came back." My voice cracked with the weight of it. "After all these years," she finally spoke. Something raw flickered across his face. Awe, relief, something deeper. He stepped closer, slowly, as though approaching a skittish creature. His hand lifted, hesitated, then settled against my cheek. His touch was rough with battle, but his thumb brushed soft across my skin. "She saved my life," he said. "You saved my life." My chest ached. "Maybe fate wanted you alive." "No," he said fiercely, his amber eyes burning into mine. "It's not fate, it's you. You're not weakness, not a curse. You're strength." His jaw tightened as though the words cost him, but he didn't look away. My strength. The bond between us pulsed, undeniable. His wolf howled inside me, demanding I answer. My own wolf pressed closer, not silent now, but urging. "Ours," she whispered. I drew in, a shaky breath, and stepped back, breaking his touch. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't call me yours. Not yet." He closed his eyes, exhaling as though forcing himself to restraint. "Then I won't. But know this, Omega, the more I see of you, the less I can resist." I turned away, clutching the remnants of my shredded chains, my heart pounding. My wolf stirred again, restless and alive. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel cursed. I felt dangerous. I felt dangerous. The palace whispers spread like wildfire. I felt them long before I saw their faces, the sneers of courtiers in jeweled collars, the scorn of warriors who bowed to Kaelen with their lips but not their hearts. The rejected Omega, dragged into the king's halls. To them, I was nothing more than a scandal in bare feet, a shadow clinging to Kaelen's rage. The night after the attack, Kaelen summoned his council. I thought it was to discuss the shadow mages, but when I entered the chamber at his side, every eye turned on me. Cold, measuring. "She does not belong here." Lord Varos, tall and iron-haired, stood first. His voice was sharp enough to slice through the heavy air. A rejected Omega has no place in the palace, much less at the king's table. If word spreads, the kingdom will fracture further. Our enemies will see weakness. And what do you suggest? Kaelen asked, his voice deceptively calm. That she be tested, Varro said smoothly. If she is truly worthy of the moon mark your healer claims, let her prove it. Let all see whether she is strength or shame. The chamber hummed with agreement. Nobles nodded, murmuring. The word test became trial. And then the word trial became execution. Nobles nodded content. Test became TV. Kaelen's growl rumbled low, dangerous. You dare speak of executing what is mine? The word hung in the air, mine. It sent heat racing down my spine, but I forced myself to stand straighter. If I flinched now, they'd see only weakness. Let them, I said suddenly. My voice carried, steadier than I felt. All eyes snapped to me. Let them test me. If I fail, you'll be rid of me. If I succeed, they'll have no choice but to see. Kaelen's eyes burned into mine, torn between fury and something deeper. He wanted to shield me, but his wolf howled in approval at my defiance. The trial was set for dawn. The courtyard was already filled when they dragged me out, chains clinking at my wrists. Nobles gathered on raised balconies, their silks bright against the pale stone. Warriors lined the edges, their hands ready on steel. At the center of the courtyard stood 3 opponents, not just men, wolves, large, seasoned fighters, chosen to humiliate me. Their sneers promised pain. If you are what the healer claims, Lord Varro said from above, you will endure. If not, your life ends here. My stomach twisted. I was no warrior. I had never trained, never been given the chance. But inside me, my wolf stirred, her voice fierce. We are not prey anymore. We stand. The chains were unlocked, clattering to the ground. The crowd jeered. The first warrior lunged before I could breathe. His size dwarfed mine, his claws flashing. Instinct screamed at me to run, but my wolf shoved me forward. We ducked, rolled, came up on our feet. His swipe missed by inches. The crowd gasped. The second came at me from the side. This time, my wolf rose fully, her strength pouring through my limbs. I bared my teeth, shifting halfway, claws ripping free. I caught his arm and twisted, hearing bone crack. His howl echoed across the courtyard. A murmur swept the nobles. Surprise, unease. The third circled me like a predator, his eyes calculating. You're no Omega, he spat. You're a mistake, he feinted left, then struck from the right. Pain blossomed as claws tore across my shoulder, hot blood spilling down my arm. I staggered. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for failure. Stand, my wolf snarled. You have stood alone for years. Stand now. With a cry, I launched myself at him. Not graceful, not trained, just raw will. My claws raked his chest, silver light sparking where my wolf's energy burned through flesh. He roared, stumbling back. The courtyard fell into stunned silence. I swayed, blood dripping from my arm, my body trembling with exhaustion. But I was still standing, still alive. The 3 warriors lay broken around me, not dead, but defeated. Slowly, I lifted my chin and faced the nobles. You wanted proof, I said, my voice hoarse but carrying. Here it is. I am no ordinary Omega, and I am not afraid of you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even those who hated me could not deny what they had seen. Above, Kaelen stood with his arms folded, his amber eyes locked on me. There was pride there, fierce and unyielding, though he said nothing. He didn't need to. His wolf's approval surged through the bond, filling me with warmth despite the blood on my skin. Lord Varos tried to recover, his face pale. She cheated. That was no Omega strength. No, Kaelen said, his voice quiet but carrying like thunder. That was the moon mark. That was fate, and she survived where most of you would have died. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. Whispers rose again, but this time, not all of them were scornful. I caught words like strength, courage, even queen. The trial was over. I had lived. Kaelen descended into the courtyard, his presence parting the crowd like a storm. He reached me, his hand steadying me when my legs nearly buckled. You defied me, he murmured, low enough for only me to hear. You would have fought the whole kingdom for me, I whispered back. But I had to fight for myself. For a heartbeat, something softened in his gaze. He brushed blood from my cheek with his thumb, his touch lingering longer than it should have. Then he turned to the crowd, raising my arm. Look well, he commanded. This is no ordinary Omega. This is the one chosen by the moon. And if any of you doubt her again, you answer to me. The courtyard roared with mixed voices, fear, awe, grudging respect. But all I felt was the bond, alive and thrumming between us, deeper than before. I had survived. And now, even my enemies whispered what Kaelen's wolf had known all along. I was not weak. I was his. The palace was quiet after the trial, but inside me everything still thundered. My wounds ached, my body trembled with exhaustion, and yet my wolf prowled restlessly beneath my skin. She had tasted freedom again, and she did not want to return to silence. Kaelen had not spoken much since the courtyard. He had walked me back to his chambers with a grip on my arm that was too tight, as if he feared I would collapse or vanish. The guards averted their eyes when he passed, though I caught the flicker of unease in their faces, not unease at him, but at me. When the doors closed behind us, the silence stretched, heavy and taut. Kaelen stood at the window, his broad back to me, shoulders tense enough to snap. The amber glow of his eyes reflected faintly in the glass, even though he hadn't shifted. Finally, he spoke, voice low and ragged. You should not have survived today. I swallowed, clutching the cloak he had draped around me. And yet I did. And his fists clenched at his sides. Do you know what that does to me? To watch you bleed while the wolves who despise you whisper? My wolf he nearly tore free. Consive. He wanted to slaughter every noble in that courtyard for daring to threaten you, his head bowed. And the worst part is, I wanted to let him. I stepped closer, the air between us charged. Why is that the worst part? He turned then, and for the first time, I saw something break in his expression. Not fury, not defiance, but grief, raw and jagged. Because I know what happens when I give in, he said. His voice trembled, though his body was steel. You see a king who rages, a wolf who terrifies his court. But do you know why? Presif. His gaze locked on mine, amber burning. Because once I didn't hold back. Once I gave everything to someone, and she destroyed me. My chest tightened. Your first mate. The words cracked the air like a whip. He flinched, but didn't deny it. Instead, he paced, his hands raking through his silver-black hair. I was young, foolish. I thought the bond was unbreakable, that fate couldn't lie. She was everything to me. My wolf sang for her. His voice roughened to a growl. But she didn't sing for me. She wanted power. She wanted influence. And when she realized I would not bend to her schemes, she betrayed me to my enemies. I froze. My breath caught. She led assassins into my bedchamber, he continued, his tone so quiet it cut deeper than a shout. I slaughtered them all, every last one, coming me. But when I reached her, she stood there smiling, as if daring me to kill her too. My wolf couldn't. He howled, broken. And she laughed as they dragged her away, knowing I would never chase her down. He turned toward me then, his eyes wet with fury and pain. Since that night, I have lived with his rage, with his grief. Every scar on my body, every scar on my soul, comes from the weight of loving someone who wanted me dead. His voice cracked, and he looked away. So don't you dare think I can accept this bond. I won't bleed like that again. I won't. The silence that followed was suffocating. His breathing was ragged, his hands trembling as if he'd confessed something poisonous. Pyres. I stepped closer, slowly, until I stood before him. His jaw was tight, his chest heaving. Potiphetian. For a moment, he looked like the boy he must have been, young, trusting, ruined. Kaelen, I whispered. He flinched as though my voice was a blade. You think your rage makes you monstrous, but I see it for what it is. Grief, betrayal, wounds that never healed. His gaze snapped to mine, fierce and desperate. Don't pity me. I don't. I lifted my hand, hesitating, then pressed it gently against the scar that cut across his chest. I forgive you. Not for your rage, not for the blood you've spilled. I forgive you for being human, for hurting, for surviving what would have destroyed most. Not. His breath hitched. The bond between us pulsed violently, and I felt his wolf surge forward, claws scraping against the edge of my soul. She sees us, his wolf whispered inside him. And somehow I heard it too. She does not fear us. Kaelen's eyes widened, as if he'd heard the same. His hand caught mine, pressing it harder against his chest. His heart thundered under my palm. Pressed? I don't deserve that, he rasped. Quote, maybe not, I said softly, but neither did I deserve rejection. And yet, here we stand. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The council, the shadows, the world outside. It was just us. His wolf howled inside him, and mine answered, rising fierce and loyal. The sound wasn't in our throats but in our souls, a harmony that vibrated through every part of me. He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against mine. His voice was barely a breath. The more I resist, the stronger it becomes. Our bond, it will devour me. Or heal you, I whispered back, if you let it. Our wolves howled again, not in defiance this time, but in recognition. And for the first time since I had met him, Kaelen didn't look like a king burning alive. He looked like a man, finally daring to hope. The council chambers smelled of smoke and fear. I had learned quickly that nobles rarely shouted when they could whisper, and their whispers were always more dangerous than open threats. But today they did not whisper. They stood in their gilded seats, voices raised in furious defiance, their silks fluttering like banners of war. Lord Varos slammed his hand on the table. This is madness, Kaelen. You defy your bloodline, your duty, by bringing her into these halls. Do you not remember who she is? Kaelen's wolf rumbled through him, his amber eyes glowing faintly. Careful, Varos. You stand too close to treason. But Varos smiled, the kind of smile that held secrets like daggers. Treason? No, my king. Truth. He turned his gaze on me, sharp and cruel. Shall I tell her, or will you finally admit what you've known since the day she walked into this palace? My breath stilled. The chamber tilted. I could feel my wolf pressing close, uneasy. What is he talking about? Kaelin's silence was answer enough. His jaw was tight, his body tense, as if every instinct screamed to silence Varos before the words could spill. But Varos, like all vipers, smelled blood. "She is no mere Omega," he declared, his voice ringing through the chamber. "She carries the blood of the Moonblood line. The line your ancestors slaughtered during the first purge, Kaelen Stormfang. Every child, every elder, every wolf butchered to ash, so the Stormfangs could rule without rivals." Gasps rippled across the chamber, some in awe, others in horror. My heart pounded as if trying to tear free. "No," I whispered, "that's impossible." But Varos's grin widened. "Is it? Look at her wolf. Silver white, the color of the Moonbloods. Look at her sight. The very gift the old kings feared. She is the last of them, their vengeance made flesh." I turned to Kaelen. He didn't deny it. His eyes gods. Those eyes were a storm of rage and grief, guilt and fury. "Say something," I demanded, my voice cracking. "Tell me it isn't true." He swallowed hard. "It is true." The words cut deeper than any blade. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stand taller. "You knew." "I suspected," he admitted, his voice low. "The moon mark, your sight, your wolf, it all fit. I prayed it was not true, because if it was," he broke off, his hand clenching into a fist. "Because if it was, then you are the living consequence of what my family destroyed. You are everything they feared, and everything I never deserved." The council erupted in chaos, nobles shouting, some in fear, some in anger, some in triumph. The word Moonblood rang out again and again, carried like a curse and a crown all at once. I felt all their eyes on me, measuring, calculating, condemning, and for the first time, I didn't bow under their weight. For years, I had lived with rejection pressed into my skin like a brand. I had been mocked, shamed, cast aside. My wolf had gone silent. My heart had been hollow, but not anymore. Not now. I stepped forward, the fire in my chest rising until my voice cut through the chamber. "Enough." The room fell silent. Even Kaelen looked at me in shock. "I have been rejected before," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. "Once by a pack who thought I was worthless, and now by a truth I never asked to carry. But rejection does not define me. Not anymore." I turned slowly, letting every noble meet my gaze. "You want to call me Moonblood? Then I will wear it as armor, not shame. You want to tie me to the sins of Kaelin's ancestors? Then know this, I am not their victim. I am not their curse. I am myself, and I choose who I become." My wolf rose with me, her presence burning bright. "We are no one's shadow. We are our own moon." The chamber held its breath. Kaelen looked at me as though seeing me for the first time, his amber eyes wide with something between awe and torment. His wolf pressed at the bond, desperate to claim, desperate to howl in unison with mine. But guilt burned in him too. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "If fate made you mine, then it also punishes me, for my blood destroyed yours. Perhaps this bond is not a gift, but a curse." I met his gaze fiercely. "Or perhaps it's redemption. You can rage against it all you like, Kaelen Stormfang, but I will not." The nobles shifted, whispers rising again, but they weren't all jeers this time. Some looked uneasy, some grudgingly impressed. A few even bowed their heads, as if fate had already begun to turn. Kaelen stared at me a long moment more, his chest rising and falling, like a man at war with himself. His wolf howled inside him, and mine answered, fierce and unbroken. The sound wasn't in the air. It was in the marrow of my bones, in the threads of the bond. Rejected once, cast out once, but no longer. I stood in the chamber of kings, with my bloodline revealed and every enemy watching, and I spoke the truth I had buried for too long. I am not the rejected Omega. I am the chosen one, and from this day forward, I will be defined not by rejection but by choice. The sacred chamber lay deep beneath the palace, carved from white stone that shimmered faintly with old magic. Candles lined the walls in spirals, their flames flickering in rhythm with my heartbeat. The air was heavy, humming with the weight of rituals older than the Stormfang line itself. Kaelen stood across from me at the pool's edge, his chest bare, his scars stark under the glow. His amber eyes glowed faintly, his wolf restless just beneath his skin. For once, he didn't try to hide it. His fury prowled in the chamber like a beast waiting for release. "This is where the bond is sealed," he said, his voice low and edged. "If we succeed, the moon herself will bear witness. If we fail—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We both knew failure meant more than death. It meant the bond collapsing into shadow, feeding the corruption still clawing at the kingdom's walls. I stepped closer, heart pounding. "Then we don't fail. Then we—" His jaw clenched. "You say it as if it's simple, but you don't know what you're binding yourself to. My wolf is not gentle. He is fire, fury, blood. I've spent years caging him. If I let him loose, then you won't face him alone," I cut in. His eyes narrowed, conflict warring inside them. But he didn't argue. Instead, he reached out his hand. I placed mine in his, feeling the heat of his skin, the tremor he tried to hide. We stepped into the pool together. Warm water rose to our waists, the surface glowing silver where it touched us. The chamber's magic stirred, recognizing what we were about to attempt. "Close your eyes," Kaelen said, his voice rough. "Open the bond, let me in." I inhaled deeply, then lowered the mental walls I'd carried for so long. Memories surged forward, the jeers at the claiming ceremony, the hollow silence of my wolf, the endless nights alone. Shame, pain, rejection. I offered it all to him, laid it bare. He staggered under the weight of it, his grip tightening on my hand. His wolf snarled in fury at my suffering, demanding blood for every wound I'd endured. Then his memories crashed into me. His first mate's betrayal, the assassins in his chambers, the endless nights spent drowning in rage. His scars burned against my palm as I felt the grief that had twisted into fury, the loneliness that had become his crown. I gasped, "Kaelen, it's too much." "Do you see now?" His voice broke. "This is why I cannot give myself to you. My wolf, he is destruction. If I let go, I will consume you." And the chamber shook, fire sparking along the pool's surface. His rage surged into the bond, hot and violent. My body trembled under the force of it. But my wolf rose fierce and unyielding. "Anchor him," she urged. "We are not prey, we are balance." I clutched his face between my hands, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You think love is submission, that if I bind myself to you, I must bend, break, obey. But you're wrong, Kaelen. Love isn't chains. It's standing when the other falls. It's fury met with strength. You don't consume me, you complete me." His breath shuddered out. The fire flared brighter, then faltered, confused. "Trust me," I whispered. "Not as your prisoner, not as your curse, as your equal." The words pierced through him. I felt it in the bond, in the way his wolf's rage bucked and then slowed, circling me not as prey but as partner. He lowered his forehead to mine, his voice breaking. "Then don't let go. Gods, don't ever let go. I won't. I promised. The chamber's magic surged. The silver water blazed with light, fire, and moonlight twining together. It rose around us, burning and purifying, flooding through the bond. I felt his fury ignite, but instead of consuming, it fused with my strength. His fire, my calm, his rage, my anchor. And then the bond snapped into place. It was not gentle. It was a conflagration, fire and light colliding until the chamber roared with energy. My wolf howled, silver and fierce, and his answered, golden and wild. Together, their voices rose in perfect harmony, echoing across stone and soul alike. I cried out as power seared through me, not pain but transformation. The bond no longer pressed like a chain around my heart. It burned as a crown, fierce and alive. His fire became mine, my light became his. Kaelen gasped, pulling me into his arms, his lips crushing against mine in a kiss that sealed not just flesh but spirit. The bond roared its approval. When the light finally dimmed, the water stilled, leaving us clinging to each other in silence. His forehead rested against mine, his voice a whisper. Equal, he said. Not chains, not fate, us. Tears slipped down my cheeks, mingling with his, us. And for the first time, his wolf was not raging. He was howling, fierce, loyal, unbroken, power nah. And mine answered him, not as prey, not as a shadow, but as his mate. The chamber was still glowing when we emerged. Silver light clung to our skin like dust from the stars, and I felt it in my chest, the bond thrumming steady and fierce, no longer fragile or wild. For the first time since I had met him, Kaelen's eyes weren't burning with fury. They burned with clarity. The rage that had once rolled off him, in waves, was gone. Not buried, not chained, but tempered, balanced. His wolf pressed against mine with warmth instead of fire, a steady presence that promised strength without destruction. The guards who had waited outside the ritual chamber fell to their knees as soon as they saw us. Word spread quickly through the palace, through the city itself. By the time we stepped into the throne hall, the nobles were gathered, their faces pale with awe and fear. Kaelen's hand never left mine as we walked the length of the hall. His grip was firm, not possessive, not desperate. Equal, partner, ARU. His wolf hummed approval, and mine lifted her head proudly, silver white and unashamed. Your king is no longer bound by rage, Kaelen said, his voice carrying across stone and marble. He is bound by balance, by fate, by choice. Proud. He turned, drawing me forward, and for the first time, I didn't flinch under their scrutiny. I raised my chin, meeting the gazes of lords and ladies who had once sneered, warriors who had once scoffed, courtiers who had once whispered rejected, worthless, nothing. No longer Omega, Kaelen declared, his voice ringing with alpha authority. No longer rejected, no longer cast aside. By bond, by blood, by fate, she is my equal. She is your queen. The hall erupted, not in cheers at first, but in chaos. Some nobles shouted in protest, others in disbelief. But then the wolves in the hall, the warriors, the servants, the forgotten, lifted their voices. Howls rose, echoing through marble arches, strong and clear. They were not howls of defiance, but of recognition, of loyalty. I stood taller. I was no longer a shadow hiding in the edges of their power. I was the moon rising over it. Kaelen lifted a crown wrought in silver and black steel, lined with runes that pulsed faintly with old magic. His hand trembled slightly as he placed it on my head. Rise, queen of the broken and the strong. Pyres. The words sank deep, shattering the chains of rejection I had carried for so long. Broken, yes, I had been broken once. But strong too, because I had endured, because I had refused to die in silence. The nobles who had doubted me bowed their heads, some out of fear, others out of reluctant respect. Lord Varos's eyes smoldered, but even he lowered himself to one knee under Kaelen's glare. The kingdom had no choice but to see me now. When the hall quieted, I stepped forward. My voice did not shake. For years, I lived as the rejected, I said, marked as weak, silenced, forgotten. I thought rejection was my end. But now I see it was only the beginning. I am not cursed. I am not nothing. I am choice. I swept my gaze across them, steady and unflinching. And I choose to be more than what fate or cruelty ever said I was. I choose to be queen, not just for myself, but for every wolf who was told they were less, for every one of you who has ever been broken, for every one of you who has ever had to claw your way from the ashes. A hush fell, heavy and absolute. Even the lords who had scorned me looked away, unable to withstand the weight of my truth. Kaelen's wolf howled, then a sound of pride and triumph, and mine rose with him. Together, the sound filled every corner of the palace, shaking the walls, shaking the kingdom itself. Fire and silver, fury and light, no longer divided, united. Kaelen turned to me, his amber gaze steady, softer now than I had ever seen it. "You've done what no one else could," he murmured. "You've tamed my wolf, not with chains, not with fear, with strength, with choice." I placed my hand over his chest, where his scars lay. "And you've done what no one else could. You gave me back my wolf. You saw me when no one else would." He smiled then, small, wild, unguarded. "Together then." "Together," I echoed. The court bowed low, the wolves howled higher, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I did not feel cast aside. I stood crowned, bound to a king who had once been consumed by fury, now tempered by love and balance. The rejected Omega no longer existed. In her place stood a queen. The queen of the broken and the strong. And beside me, the Alpha King bowed not in dominance, but in partnership.